with all that said, I think it's time to move on to the final topic of this episode with you, Jordan. I want to say thanks again for coming on. This has been an awesome time. But the center position, what do you think the 49ers should do there?
So the center position, one of my favorite philosophies with this, from evaluating centers, Sam Monson of PFF has a really good take that I've kind of, adopted my own thinking in the same way. He constantly says the center position is not a big deal until you don't have one. It's a position where if you just have an average guy, a league average player who can come in, stay healthy, contribute enough, they're not going to be a game wrecking, devastating in the run game, stalwart pass protector, but just a decent average player, you're probably not too worried about the center position. It's not a position where you're like, wow, we really have to get better here. I think the 49ers saw with the revolving door they had at the interior offensive line this last year. It maybe magnified how important it is to have a center in that spot. I think that Ben Garland played very well in the 5 games that he did play. He just unfortunately got hurt. I think, if I recall correctly, he came into the year with a high ankle sprain he suffered in training camp. So he started the year off already hurt on just, injuries happen. It's unfortunately part of the game. But the way I'm looking at the 49ers center position is I don't think center is really a huge need. I think that they could get a guy like Garland. They could get a guy. There's players out there they could get. There's a couple guys in the draft I really like that could play that interior O-line spot, that could rotate between center, guard, whatever you need to plug. I'm far more worried about right guard. But in terms of the center, I think that getting continuity for any position along the offensive line is going to give your offense a much better chance to succeed because of how reliant offensive linemen are on one another, and knowing the guy next to you is going to be in the right spot and getting used to tendencies and knowing that, you can trust the man next to you really is kind of an undervalued thing. And I think that the Niners are in a position where if they really look at the center position and they're like, we need some stability here, I could totally see it. And then the other thing is the center position in the offense that Kyle Shanahan runs dictates the protections. They're the ones calling out assignments in the run game. They have a little bit more on their plate than a typical center may have in a given offense. Centers generally are doing a lot of this for most, but in Kyle's offense, it's a little bit more responsibility. So, I know the name that we talked about and that a lot of people on, in 49ers Twitter and all those areas have talked about is Alex Mack with the Falcons. He had his best season of his career with Kyle in 2016. Run blocking grade over 90 in back-to-back seasons then. A guy who for the most part has stayed healthy. He played in 15 games last year, but for the most part he's logged over 1,000 snaps 5 out of the last 6 years. And last year he had 972, so he was only 28 shy. If he plays 28 more snaps, he's at 6 years in a row at over 1,000. So he does give you that stability there. The concern for me is that his run blocking grade has declined each of the last 5 seasons. And it's been a steady decline, but it's starting to kind of drop off fairly severely. He did allow a good amount of pressures last year, but again, it could have been just I haven't watched enough Falcons tape. That's something I need to do in the next couple weeks to really put all the blame on him. But if we're going just purely off of pressures assigned, he wasn't great. I believe, if I recall correctly, the number off the top of my head, I think it was 25, 27. Sorry, it was between 25 and 30, somewhere in that range. And it's at a point where if Kyle and the offensive staff, the front office, whatever, is feeling that they're going to get value out of him knowing the cadence and knowing the verbiage of the offense and understanding what protections to call out and what assignments to assign and how to just really be, not necessarily a leader in the sense of that, Trent Williams isn't or Mike McGlinchey isn't, like team captains. Like those guys are leaders too. It's just a little bit different responsibility. So if the 49ers feel that he's bringing somebody that they can not only trust to play games, but somebody that they can trust to
sort of like almost like a player coach type of thing. Not exactly, but to understand what the offense needs to do, what other guys' responsibilities are, and really be able to determine that. And the reason why I think that's massive that you bring that up is because he's played twice with Kyle, right? He played in Atlanta under Kyle and in Cleveland, if I remember correctly. And I know that he was in Atlanta, at least he was really, really good. And that was the year where the Falcons offense was one of the best offenses ever. And he had a ton of credit went to him. And you brought up just like how his run blocking, his grade has gone down. And we were talking about this before. It makes sense. I mean, he's an aging player. He's already had his big deal, I think, and this was his final year, I believe. Let's see. Last year, he was making about, what was it, $10 million, like $8 to $10 million. He had a cap hit of $10.5 million. So he's coming off of a 5-year, $45 million contract. I don't think he's at that value anymore. He's 34 years old. Definitely not the same caliber player, but I do think bringing that value of just being able to understand, being able to be that sort of player coach at the center position when it's so important on understanding what the protection is going to be, what the blocking scheme calls for, what both of those guard spots need to do next to him, especially the right guard. I mean, you just brought up that you think that's a massive need. Well, if you have a guy next to you that is, let's say that they bring Alex Mack in, just hypothetical, on 1 year, $3 million deal, and they draft their starter at right guard, which I don't know if this would happen, but you would want a guy like Alex Mack to really mentor that guy, especially if he's an early pick and they want him to develop into the guard of the future. They want that guy to be their guard for the next 8 years. That's a great guy to have next to them. But once again, it's the cost aspect of it. How much is that worth? And that's where it gets a little difficult. Is there a value or a contract that is kind of like your bar for signing Alex Mack?
I wouldn't go over $3.5 million a year. It's just he's getting older. He's 30. He'll be 35, I think, this coming up season. I think 35 or 36. I know he's. Let me double check because it's going to bug me. He's 35 now. Sorry, he'll be 36 in November this year. I think that offensive linemen definitely can play a little bit later into their 30s than other positions generally can. And the way, modern science, modern sports medicine, all these things, like you can extend the career a little bit longer. Like 30, 36 may not be as old as it would have been 20 years ago. But I'm also not, like it's a stopgap. It's something for a year or two that you can probably count on. But again, you have to factor in the fact that his production has declined each of the last few years, and that's to be expected. You regress with age as you get older. He had a very good peak, which you can expect from a player in their prime. You just need to know that you're not getting a prime Alex Mack, and that's the thing that I've seen from a lot of discussions, that people have this assumption that you're just somehow going to pair him with Kyle and you're going to get 2016 Alex Mack. Like, sure, he might look better in a system that he's succeeded in before. I totally see that point, but it's unrealistic to expect a guy to play at the age of 36 the way he played at the age of 30 and 31. Like, it's just not. It's nature. You get older, your joints flare up a little bit more. It's a little bit harder to work. I don't say work, but it's a little bit harder to just put out that same production. It's life. We get older. Athletes are no exception, no matter how hard these guys train. So I am of the mindset where they can do something like, they could get him for like 2 years, like $8 million, and they were able to have his lower cap hit this year, push some money back next year when they really do have a lot of guys coming off the books and they have a little bit more cap space to work with. I would be okay with that. And again, my opinion here really doesn't matter. It's ultimately what Kyle wants to do. And if Kyle feels that this guy can come in, he's going to give me consistency at the position. He's going to, obviously freak injuries happen, but for the most part, he's proven to be durable. And he's a guy that I can go out there that I know is going to call the right protections, is going to be able to protect whoever the quarterback may be behind him and give them a better chance to win. So I'm not totally against it, but if it comes to a situation where you're having to pay him 5, 6, I don't think we get to 7, but 5, if it was like 2 years, 12 million, 2 years, 12 million, something like that, I might look at keeping Ben Garland instead. I think that Garland is just as good in the running game. The pass blocking is a little different. Mack had a really bad year last year, but it was kind of an anomaly. And it was a strange year all around. So I try not to base too much evaluation on 2020.
Well, especially for a guy that's a lot older too, that has his like a veteran player like Mack, who's going to be 36 next year, having his normal routine completely thrown out of alignment is a big dilemma for him, I guess. And that's a huge setback early on in the year too. So I also wonder kind of how he improved as the year went on. Like, was that something where he struggled, the first 4 games or first 6 games, then got became his old self? Because that could be something that would be pretty telling as well. But you did mention that his run blocking grade, and we talked about PFF grades earlier, that you shouldn't base everything off of them. But just looking at that and going like, okay, like he's been viewed as a guy that's been slowly diminishing in the run blocking game. I completely agree that you can't sign him going, oh, look, we're going to get this elite center. Or we have this elite center now. No, I think it's more of a move to have a guy that's reliable, because even though we've talked about the age, me and you talked about before, he's been an anchor wherever he's been at. He's missed very few games throughout his career. I think you said he missed one game last year and he played all 16 in 2018, or sorry, 2019. So he's a guy that plays has almost played the entire season throughout his whole career. So I think that's a big thing, especially for the 49ers, and keeping that continuity on the offensive line. Because on the left, I mean, look at the left and the right side of the offensive line this year. You have two tackles. One of them, I think we would agree that Trent Williams is the better tackle than Mike McGlinchey, but he has Laken Tomlinson next to him. Mike McGlinchey has, it seems like, a new guy every couple weeks because someone gets banged up or someone has to kick inside or, someone has to move. And we see Mike McGlinchey struggle a lot more. And there were other factors, there were his weight and whatnot. But it's a lot easier for Trent Williams when he knows the guy next to him has been there all year and is just consistent. He knows what he's going to play like. He knows what he's going to do. He knows how to play with him, and they have that continuity there. And so I think if you bring in Alex Mack, that's a guy you can sign to for a 2-year, $6 million to 2-year, $8 million deal. And he's there. He's the rock for those 2 years. You get the guy to develop behind him. I love it. You brought up Ben Garland. So just to maybe go over real quick, like, what do you see in Ben Garland?
I just see a guy that's not going to cost a lot of money, most likely. Was good when he was in there. And again, this is back to the philosophy of, if you get a guy who's just decent at playing center, who's just not terrible, which Garland never has been. He's been consistent when he's been there. He's been a steadying force that you can rely on when he's been healthy and on the field. I just don't like. For me, there's certain positions I just don't think are worth sinking a lot of money into. And I've seen some things floated around that, well, if they get better center play, then the tackle play will improve. And like, while maybe that's true to an extent, I think it's more so just getting continuity than actual like improved play. I don't think Weston Richburg was anything to, write home about in 2019. He was a solid player. He was consistent, but he wasn't, he certainly wasn't worth the contract he was given, in my opinion. Again, that was at a time when the Niners had a bunch of cap space. Kyle showed how important that center position to him was when they made that front office made that deal and they brought him in. But I just personally, like, it's my philosophy, I just don't think that center is that valuable. I think that shoring up the tackle positions is far more important, and just getting continuity. Because unless you're Aaron Donald or DeForest Buckner, or a few of these just rare exceptions, it's really hard for teams to generate pressure up the interior. So if you get a guy that's just semi-decent, it's pretty easy. The areas you really want to invest in are on the outside, where these guys are going up against a little different breed of athlete in the edge rushers compared to interior linemen, and they're generally on an island by themselves, which is why, again, I've seen some theories floated around that they should let Trent Williams walk and sign Corey Linsley. To me, that would be beyond stupid. And that's no disrespect to Corey Linsley or the people floating those ideas. I just can't see a scenario where you're sinking money into the center position and letting one of the best tackles, not only in the league now, but of all time, walk when that position is far more important in my eyes.
Yeah, also Corey Linsley, I don't know if we can just kind of do a side by side. I think you'd rather have the athlete of Trent Williams, pulling off the edge and lead blocking your way for Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson. That's just me though. But I agree, man. I agree. You would rather pay both those tackle spots and really work on sealing the edge. And that's something that not even just the tackles, but you look at like when George Kittle's on and off the field, if he's able to seal the edge, that run game looks so much different. Where, not to say that the center position isn't valuable or anything, but I don't think you have to have that elite player in the middle. It's not as important as having those elite guys on the outside, especially in the offense that the 49ers run. So I also like that you bring up Corey Linsley. I'm not the biggest fan on signing him. He's 29. He wasn't the best player over a couple years before last year. And then last year he had an all-pro season. And of course he's going to get broken off. But I think he's a prime candidate to kind of be one of those guys that signs for a lot of money and then isn't worth the contract, and the team wants him cut or whatever down the road. And I don't wish this on Corey Linsley. I hope he is successful, but that's just my opinion on him. And I like the Alex Mack deal. I also think it's totally reasonable to come back with Ben Garland, but I think having even both Ben Garland and Alex Mack, if you don't have to pay them that much money, I think that's the best case scenario in my opinion, just because if Alex Mack was to go down, or Lincoln Tomlinson, or if they get another right guard and they're starting right guard, having Ben Garland to back up all of those positions, I think is really good, because I think he's proven that he can be a really solid player in the 49ers offense and on the offensive line. And I think he has a clear understanding of what his role is. So I do like bringing him back a lot, but also Alex Mack, $3 to $4 million a year, no more than 2 years though, because we have seen his play diminish at least somewhat. So I like it though. I think that him being, I guess, kind of like a mentor, him and Trent Williams both being mentors to hopefully some youth on the offensive line, I think that could go a long way towards developing this offensive line, not only for 2021, but also just for the future, and having, some guys that fill these roles. Because we're talking about Trent Williams coming back right now, but we don't know how long he's going to be playing in the NFL. Like, he could be only a couple years. So you might have a situation where, say they did get an Alex Mack and they have an Alex Mack and a Trent Williams, and they have them for the next 2 or 3 years, and then it's it. Like, you got to find those guys to replace them. So I think having a stopgap option is smart, but it's got to be someone that you can develop a player behind. So I think the offensive line, I think they need to acquire some overall talent there, and have some building blocks, but also have some depth behind some older players. So I think that having Mac there, I do like it. But thanks again, Jordan, for coming on. This was an awesome episode. I really like going over these guys. So many variables into this 49ers offseason and the NFL offseason as a whole. But it's Thursday today. We got 6 days until the offseason officially starts. But I believe that everyone can start negotiating and talking on either Sunday or Monday. So it's going to be exciting over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, dude. I had a blast. Anytime, happy to come on. And, hopefully free agency, I think it'll be a little bit different this year than most years. It might be a little bit more close to the frenzy you see in like NBA free agency, where you get a lot more big names out there and a little bit more exposure. So it should be interesting next, 7 to 10 days or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jordan. I appreciate it a lot. Anyone listening, like, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. If you're on YouTube, want to check out the podcast, that'll be linked. If you're on the podcast, I'll put a YouTube link in the overall podcast description, so make sure to check that out. But thanks for everyone for listening, and I will talk to you guys soon.